Hi, my name is Rob Zarfas. I'm 28 years old. I was born and raised in Salem, Oregon, and I am a Fruit Ninja Grandmaster. Fruit Ninja on the iPhone I'm okay at, but Fruit Ninja on the Kinect is where I held the world record. Yes, I held the world record for Fruit Ninja Kinect for the first 9 or 10 months that the game was out. So the trick is to get combos. I picked it up because shoulder rehab was boring and it was a good workout, and a couple weeks later I had the world record, defended the world record for a year, and retired at the top of my game. Decided that it was somebody else's turn. I don't know quite when it all started. I guess it's kind of always been this way, but you know how kids always imagine that everything is alive and like their toys and furniture in their house like are talking to them, like in the Brave Little Toaster. I was totally that way too, and as I got older, I just never grew out of it. And eventually I realized that none of my friends thought that way, lived in that world, but I still did, and I didn't really understand why. So I remember one time, I think I was 9, and I was building with Kinects, which are kind of like Legos, and every single piece was just calling out to me, like, pick me, or like, no, don't choose him, like, or I don't want to be connected to him. And I remember just having to stop and put them down and walk outside because it was so loud. I couldn't even think what to build. I couldn't even think what to do. And so I remember coming out here and just and stopping and standing right here and thinking, if this is my imagination, shouldn't I be able to control it? And that was the first time that I was ever afraid of what was going on inside my head. I don't really remember how things progressed or changed, but the next definitive thing I remember is on the first day of 7th grade, the voice, the person living inside my head wanted me to go talk to this girl because he wanted to introduce me to the person living inside her head, but she didn't know that person was there like I knew that he was there. You know, this kind of conversation and relationship with the voices or with the people inside my head just kind of continued and grew. Eventually, by the time high school started, there was 4 distinct voices in my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I would be in a library, and 3 of them would be sitting there at a table looking at me. They looked like me and they spoke like me, but there was something different about each one. And they were who I'm not on the left, who I could have been, and who I won't become on the right. And then there was a 4th voice called the Wanderer that just was always somewhere in the library, and occasionally he would come and talk to me, but not very often. And he was very scary and really creepy. I just lived life with these voices. I talked to them constantly, literally constantly. In the back of my head, I had this continual dialogue going with them about everything that was in front of me, and we talked together about what I should say in every conversation and what I should do in every situation. You know, every once in a while I would close my eyes and go to the library, and they would say, hey, we need to take you somewhere. And I would be somehow transported to a totally different place and have this, amazing adventure, sometimes on an alien planet or sometimes in the past. And I'd come back and open my eyes, and not even a few seconds, not even a minute had passed. And I developed this whole kind of memory, this whole kind of alternate reality that I lived in more and more and more. And to the point where I had years of memories from these conversations and these activities kind of stocked up that had nothing to do with the real world. And it started to become more of me than the real world was. At some point, spring break of my freshman year of high school, I really liked a girl, and I wanted to impress her and show her how special I was, and so I kind of told her about some of the things that were going on. And the whole time all this was going on, I wanted to believe it was real because it made me feel special and unique. But at the same time, I knew there was something wrong, and I knew it wasn't normal, and so I would continually have to create these elaborate kind of fabrications about why this was okay that this was going on inside my head, how this coincided with Christianity and how it wasn't bad, because I wanted it. I wanted my friends in the library to be with me, and I wanted to be special. Eventually, it just got too weird for her. Talking to me about what was going on inside my head was too much for her, and she told her parents, and that kind of filtered through, and I ended up in counseling. After going to counseling for a while, I don't exactly remember what she said, but I remember her saying, "I think you're gonna be okay." And just having that feeling of like, okay, I'm not sick, I'm not crazy, things are gonna be okay, hopefully maybe things will go back to normal. And then coming home on that day, I heard one of the three in the library kind of chuckle, kind of scoff. So I closed my eyes and I went to the library and I looked at them and I said, "What?" And they wouldn't tell me, and I demanded. I said, "What were you laughing about?" Because this was a very derisive scoff that I heard. Suddenly they all three turned to me, and the one in the middle said, "We made you say what you said to that counselor so that she would think we weren't here. We're in charge now." And that was the day that everything changed. It went from being fun and went from me wanting that to the worst possible thing I can describe. At first it wasn't so bad. They started, instead of telling me just, consulting with me about what to do, they started telling me to manipulate people and lie to people, and started pushing me to create situations that were hurtful to others and destructive to my own life. And if I didn't do what they said, I got berated, and it became very loud inside my own head and very hard to be me. And I started to really lose myself. I fell into paranoia. I was always paranoid that somebody was gonna come and get me. Somebody from these other adventures that I had been off on was gonna come and do something bad, and it was totally unfounded. I mean, there was no reason to be scared. I was just paranoid, and because of that, I stopped eating. I kind of fell into, I guess you could say, anorexia. I would never eat more than one meal a day, and I stopped sleeping normally. When I was about 14, I stopped being able to sleep normally, and that got worse and worse and worse until I was only sleeping maybe once every 3 or 4 days, maybe 4 or 5 hours every 4 days at its worst. There was one time where I went 15 days, 15 nights without sleeping at all, because I was so scared to sleep, and I just couldn't do it. A lot of things happened to kind of push me further and further into kind of this depression. My body got weaker and weaker from lack of sleep and lack of food, and I had less and less control over what was going on in my mind, and it became more and more just being tormented, sometimes 24 hours a day in my own head, and there was no room for me there. So then eventually I decided that I couldn't take it anymore, and that I was gonna end my life. And I planned a date, and I kind of set things up. I was very careful to hide it from everybody. I was very good at lying and manipulating others at that point. And so I went to my room here at my parents' house, and everybody was gone for the weekend, and I was gonna end my life. I put on some music in the background. I had been into kind of Christian metal, and so I had the CD I hadn't really listened to, and I tossed it in the CD player just to try and drown out my own self-doubt. And I was getting ready to slit my wrists, and then a song came on, and it said, "Things will get better, this I promise you, and I know it won't feel this way forever. Things will get better, this I promise you, loneliness won't last forever." And it was the song Promise by Spoken. I looked at my stereo, and I looked right at it, and I said, "You're promising me things will get better." And then the chorus repeated, and it said it again. And it was and I said, "Okay, I'm going to hold you to that promise." And eventually I got to meet the guy who wrote the song, and I told him that, and I got to shake his hand and just say thank you for making that promise to me. So that stalled me for a long time, and I sat there almost all night just with that song on repeat in the background, just saying, what am I gonna do now? Because I can't keep living like this. I can't keep living like this. And that's when Jesus showed up. So this is my old room. My sister now has moved in since I moved out, but this is where I was when I was gonna end it. And this is where I was sitting, I was actually sitting on the ground. So I was sitting on the ground right here, right here, just like this, just thinking, what am I gonna do? And Jesus appeared to me, and I saw myself in a pit, in a deep, dark, narrow pit, sitting on the ground. And I looked at the walls, and they were just muddy and nasty. It reminds me, the only way I've been able to describe it is, you remember the part in Homeward Bound where Shadow falls under the railroad tracks and he like can't get his way out because it's all muddy and nasty and dark? Like, that's exactly what it was like, but it was a narrow pit. And I looked up, and Jesus was standing on the edge of the pit, and he reached his hand down to me, and he said, come up here. There's life up here. I wish I could communicate to you the beauty of the word life when it came out of his mouth. It was more than just being alive. It was everything. And I looked down, I looked around to see if there was any way to get out, and I saw that the walls were jagged and sharp and like broken glass and like obsidian almost, you know, all sunk into this nasty mud. And I looked back up at Jesus and I said, but it will hurt. It will hurt to climb out. And he looked down at me and he said, it will hurt either way, whether you stay or climb out. And I looked down and realized that what I was sitting on was the same jagged, nasty, sharp material. But he said, but the hurt, but the pain of climbing out will end. And I said, okay. And then I was back in my room. I got up and actually climbed out the window, which we're not gonna do, but I'll take you out there. So I came out here and just sat right here, just like I often did, and I watched the sun rise over those trees, and as the sun hit me, it didn't just warm my body. For the first time, I realized that there was light inside my heart, that I had, for the first time that I could remember, for the first time in years, I had hope. And I grabbed onto that spark of hope, and I actually jumped down and ran into that field over there and screamed at the top of my lungs to the voices inside my head, who are you to tell me that I am less than what I should be? Who are you? I screamed, and they didn't answer for the first time. And I came back inside and made myself breakfast, a big breakfast, and ate. I also started saying, I won't listen to you anymore, and I won't do what you say. And I repeated that mantra over and over and over again, constantly, nonstop, for 48 hours, for 2 full days. And finally, after 2 days of telling them that I wouldn't listen anymore and I wouldn't do what they said, they finally backed off a little and stopped berating me. But it kept getting worse. It kept getting harder. I would try to sleep and they would send nightmares. Yeah, every night that I slept, I would see my family slaughtered or mutilated or destroyed, or all my friends were dying and I was trying to save them and I couldn't do anything. And most mornings I would wake up just in tears because it was just so traumatic. But I learned that waking up meant that I had slept, and that whatever I had gone through, whatever dream I had, meant that I had slept. And every ounce of sleep I got meant I had more power and more energy to resist them. And I got stronger and stronger and stronger. And I just kept pulling, pushing, drawing closer to God, and also pushing and rejecting and pushing farther and farther away from them. And I clawed my way out of that pit, and it took at least 6 months and another 18 months of being very conscious and very intentional about not going back. But by the time I was about a senior in high school, I didn't fear the voices anymore, and I was okay, and my mind was under my control most of the time. For me, the most important process of pulling myself out of that pit was anchoring myself to reality. I found some friends and started hanging out with this group of guys more and more and more, because I knew that everything I did with them was real, and I could separate out everything that wasn't, and I could anchor myself to the truth, to what I knew was real. And that allowed everything else to kind of wash away, or me to push it away, while I was holding on to what I knew was true. Throughout my kind of healing process, I kept a notebook, I kept a journal of all the things that weren't real, so that I could have something to hold on to and say, like, this is fiction and this is my reality that I was anchoring onto. And this is the very last conversation between myself and the one that was the voices. And it's the last time I ever heard from them, and they've never been back. And in that conversation, it got really intense. It was a fight. And that's when I really admitted it to myself that the whole time it was a demon. It was not something inside me. It was an external demon oppressor. And then when I finally stood in the victory that Jesus Christ already won, but when I finally stood with him and accepted that victory for myself, the voices couldn't stand, and they left and were just totally destroyed out of my head. So we're here at Calvary Chapel, Corvallis, and this is a very important place to my story because the very first time I was here, I met someone named Ryan Sugai and ended up sharing my story with him. And after I did that, he brought me right here to this exact spot where I'm standing right now, and called over Lee Edward and a girl named Rachel, and they prayed over me. I'll never forget what Lee prayed. He asked God that he would seal off my mind. And even though the library was gone, and even though the voices were gone, that space in my head was still there. And when he prayed that my mind would be sealed, I felt like a window slammed shut that I hadn't known was there. And for the first time in 10 years, or for the first time in living memory, I was alone inside my own head, and it was quiet. What I've come to through all of this is just Satan only has one trick. He's only ever done one thing, and that's lie. The very first thing he ever did was lie to himself and believe that he could become God. And then the second thing he did was lie to Eve and say that God's not as great as he says he is. And that's all he's been doing ever since, is feeding us lies. We internalize them and believe them. And the source of all of our sin and all of our pain is believing those lies and letting them play out and rule our lives. I think anybody who comes to me with problems or struggles, with spiritual warfare in any form, I always take them back and say, where's the lie? And we dig down together and find that lie and speak the truth over it and eliminate it from their life, and everything else resolves. Once you speak the truth and eliminate and stop believing the lie, Satan has no more power over you. He can never hurt you if you don't believe his lies. There's nothing he can do. And I think for me, this whole process has just given me this unshakable faith that we are standing in victory with Christ. With what I've seen and what I've gone through, nobody can tell me that Jesus isn't real. Nobody can tell me that he's not with us. Nobody can tell me that he's not a strong fortress who protects us. The most important thing to me is the truth. And that's what I've wanted my whole life. And now that I have that, I love my life. And I love where it's going. And I have a beautiful family, I have an amazing wife. And I'm super excited about the adventure that we're going on together as parenting and just in life in general, because I know it's centered on the truth. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah?